Right, that is all for me for now. I am going to hand over to Sarah and Laura, who are going to take you through what social care means in Cheshire West and Chester and what direct payments are. We know, again, we've had plenty of feedback that people don't know what direct payments are, how to access them, how they can use them, etc. So this is your opportunity to ask questions. Sorry, guys. This is your opportunity to ask any of those questions. What we will be doing, we've obviously given the questions to the guys ahead of time that you've asked before the event, but please do feel free to use the chat function, and we will be monitoring any questions, and we'll ask, is it okay, Laura, and so if we do it at the end, you know, any questions that they might have, unless it's specifically relevant, we'll leave until the end of your presentation. Is that okay?
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Brilliant. Okay, guys. Well, you do in your best Chris Whitty voice. Just ask me to move to the next slide, and I will do that. Mute myself first, and then I will.
Thank you. I feel a little bit croaky this morning, so hopefully my voice will get better as we go on. But I'm Sarah Banks. I'm the Senior Manager for Disabled Children and Young People. So I've got the overall responsibility over our Children with Disabilities team, our Transitions team, and our Short Break Home as well. Laura, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Laura Stokes-Hughes, and I'm the Senior Family Caseworker for the Children with Disabilities team. So I have line management responsibility for the family caseworkers within the early help offer of Children with Disabilities team.
Thank you. Didn't even have to prompt you that time, Julie. Good work. So our service is just one part of children's social care and early help. We're very specific to those children with the most complex disabilities, but that doesn't mean children that don't have as complex disabilities don't get a service. So we work with children from the ages of 0 to 25. We've got the 3 teams that I mentioned. So the manager of the Children with Disabilities team is Cheryl Broadhurst, and Laura manages our early help offer within our Children with Disabilities team. And our manager of our Transitions team is Kath Hinkston, and the manager for the Short Breaks Home is Sarah Pay. And this is just some important information about how you actually make a referral into children's social care and early help. So we have a front door team called IART, and all referrals need to come through this team, and they will screen them and look at the best team to send your referral to. And we've also got an emergency out of hours team as well, for outside of office hours. Thank you. So all referrals that come through to children's social care are screened by a team called IART, and what they need to do is make sure that they gather all the information they can from social care, education and health to make a decision really about the best place to signpost the referral to. So that might be our universal offer, so that's what anybody can access, or it might be some more targeted support, and it might be that you need a social worker, so it will go through to a social work team. Yeah. So that's just there really a graphic version of what that continuum need looks like and where your child and you may sit. So in terms of universal, it is those children that can access all the services that are out there for anybody. And then if your child has got maybe additional needs, or there's additional needs going on in your family, it might be appropriate that you are supported through Team Around the Family, which we call Partnership Plus. And then at the top end of the continuum is what we call statutory social work. So that's when we're referring to children in need, maybe child protection, children that need to come into our care. That's kind of the top level, but we always try and manage need at the lowest level possible. Thank you. So the Children with Disabilities team is actually a very small team within the council. And as a result, we make sure that we've got a very specific criteria to make sure that we work with those children that absolutely need us the most. So that's just a bit of a run through of what our criteria is. We work with the children with that severe learning disabilities, children who might have complex physical disabilities. We work with children with autism where they have a significant impact on their life due to their autism. And the reason that we have the criteria, as I was saying, is because we just don't have the capacity to work with all children, and nor is that right, because actually disabled children should be included in all teams and all services. It's, you know, they don't need to be in just specialist services. Yep. Laura?
Yeah, so the early help offer that we have, so within our team, we have family caseworkers. So when they have a diagnosed NHS disability, which you can see from the previous slide, we would have a look at whether if there wasn't that support there, if there'd be that significant impairment to the young person's health or development. If we'd also look into, with support from the integrated access and referral team, whether if we didn't become involved, how that would impact further and potentially increase risk. And in addition to that, whether there's been universal or commissioned short break services, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next couple of slides. If they've been looked into previously, if they haven't, then we'll allocate a family caseworker who will complete an assessment of need, and that is holistic. So it will take into account the child or young person with the disability, their siblings, as well as the parents or carers as well. And once that's completed, it normally takes about 4 weeks. Once that's completed, and we'll do that through home visits and a multi-agency response, so everybody that's working with that family will be involved within that assessment. The caseworker will collate that and put that all together in a person-centred, trauma-informed approach, share that with the family, and when they're in agreement with that, we will start the team around the family meetings as well, to make sure that it's all nicely together, everyone's on the same page. Whilst the assessment's taking place, we will look at those universal commissioned short break services with the support of our commissioned service Disability Positive. If they're not able to meet the individual needs of that child due to their individual needs, then we will then look at something a little bit different, potentially direct payments, and we would go to the multi-agency panel for further consideration of that. In terms of family caseworkers being allocated, we work with universal families on the continuum of need, or the window wiper, as I like to call it, all the way up to multiple and complex. So sometimes in life things might happen whereby it might tip over and we might have some concerns for that child, young person, or whatever's going on, because life happens. And then there is something called a step-up conversation that I will have with my line manager. We might do a joint visit with a social worker, which would result in then it might be able to be managed really effectively within the TAF, or sometimes it might be that they need a short period of time with some additional support from a social worker. The other part of us being allocated is that they'd need to have that education healthcare plan in place as well, which also supports us with looking at what the current needs are, what they'd like to change for that person, or what they would like to have support with to support them with moving forwards into the future as they move into teenagehood, adulthood, etc., and have some real positive outcomes, really.
Yep. So the other aspect of our children with disabilities team is we have a statutory social work offer as well. So we look at allocating a social worker if there's any particular safeguarding concerns that we need to work with the family about. So if we think that the child is likely to suffer significant harm, then that would be allocated to a social worker. If there's risks of family breakdown or a child coming into care, we know it can be very challenging meeting the needs of disabled children. So there are times when families struggle and they need the extra support of a social worker. If the child's needs are particularly complex and challenging to meet, then we'll allocate the social worker. And also if we have children that are staying away overnight in terms of a short break, we have that's overseen by a social worker. Okay, Laura?
Yeah. This is one of the favourite bits, I suppose, of our job. It's when the family caseworkers then get to look out what's currently on offer. So like Sarah said, we are a very small team and we cover the whole of Cheshire West and Chester. So we need to kind of know what's currently out there and available, but we like to make it as person-centered as possible. So obviously there's a list here of various different things that we can sometimes access, such as Tiny Steps, Space, Little Penguins, Brio. Community Connections is a commissioned service by us and a fantastic service that we can get through Disability Positive. They have many strings to their bow, one of which is that they can go out and meet with the families and get a real person-centered picture of what this young person's needs are, what they would like to do, what parents, carers would like them to be able to do socially, and if there's things that they would like them to achieve. And they can go back and find out particular groups that are within their area and within their reach if they have difficulty with travel, etc. And then they can come back with a bespoke offer in terms of what groups and that are available. Once they've got that, they can also look at community connection payments and applying for those. And applying for those and having support from Disability Positive to apply for those, which means that those groups that they're interested in attending, they can attend those, which would mean that the parents, carers would also get a short break, as well as the young person have the opportunity to have some fun activities, enjoyment activities, and learning new skills in preparation for adulthood with positive outcomes. There is, as part of the universal services as well, there's another part of the offer with Community Connections whereby they can go in and upskill staff and to support the individual needs of that person as well. So again, it's really person-centred and can put parents and carers' minds at ease a little bit of when their child or young person's going to a particular group. We also have endorphins as well, which is in various places within different localities which they can access, and they also run summer as well as in term time as well. Okay, so targeted short breaks.
So we have a multi-agency panel. So the route into panel is via an assessment by either an early help from a family caseworker or a social worker, and it might be at the end of that assessment that we've explored everything else that's out there, and actually we still can't say that we've met that child's needs. So we need a bit of a multi-agency view on the best way to meet the unmet need. So panel consists of, I'm the chair, but we also have reps from social care, we have health representation, LD CAMS, we have education, commissioning, for everybody, and continuing healthcare as well from the NHS sit on our panel too, so we can look at children's needs holistically and make sure that families are aware of every service that they can be accessing. So the kind of conversations that we have about panel are, it could be that we look at a direct payment to support the family so that the parent can receive a payment, to employ a personal assistant to meet the needs of that child if we can't find any other way of meeting that need. It might be that direct payments aren't appropriate, so we might commission a domiciliary care agency to meet maybe personal care needs of a child. And we'll also discuss whether overnight support is needed. So that is at the most complex end of our continuum of need, if we're saying that a child needs to spend some time outside of their family home. Okay. So direct payments, which is why we're here. I'm conscious that I'm going to be speaking our language very much, so I will appreciate any questions, or if you want me to clarify anything at the end, I'm more than happy for that.
If we get into too much jargon, I'll let you know.
We need a buzzer, don't we, Jules?
Yeah, I get a buzzer, didn't I?
Yeah. So direct payments are a payment that we can make to families to purchase services that will meet the needs of that child and the family. And direct payments were introduced really to provide greater flexibility and control, and to be more personalised in terms of the ways we meet the needs of children. So generally direct payments, we look at agreeing and a number of hours of support that a child might need a week. So it could be that this child can't access any activities after school or at the weekend. There's no groups out there currently that can meet the needs of the child. So we might look at saying, okay, so on a Saturday, you could have 4 hours support from a personal assistant to go swimming or to go to enable you to access a group, for example. And that would mean then that this is where it gets more complicated. Parents become employers. Effectively, we don't manage the employment of that individual to meet the needs of the child. That comes down to parents, and you're not out there on your own doing it. We commission Disability Positive to support with the recruitment, with payroll, and all those bits, employment admin type tasks. And it could be, like I said, accessing clubs, it could be meeting personal care needs, it could be, well, quite often we have a focus on building independence skills as well. We want our children to develop all the skills that they possibly can and to have as independent adulthood as they are possibly able to. So we very much focus on what can we do to enable that child to achieve everything possible. Okay. If a parent's unable to manage a direct payment, for example, or if we're unable to identify somebody to employ as a personal assistant, we can look to domiciliary care agencies, they're called. So these are agencies that employ staff members to provide care and support to individuals. I have to be honest that the offer for children is very limited. Most of these companies work with adults, but we do have some that we can commission to take children out to social activities, to meet personal care needs in the home, and provide a short break for parents. Yeah. Ooh. And we also have our very own Ofsted outstanding short breaks home, which is Pinewood. So we have we're registered for 3 bedrooms. And we're open Thursday through to Monday, and we can provide overnight short breaks to those children that absolutely really need to be able to stay away from their homes, to provide parents with a short break, but also to provide our children with fun activities and develop their independent skills and be able to have friendship groups and social time.
And that's from the age of 8 upwards, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, we have to be registered through Ofsted to provide this service, and our registration is from 8 to 18. And we also, last but not least, is our transitions team, which is at the older end of the spectrum. So transitions work with young people from 16 to 25, and the focus is on preparation for adulthood. So it's about identifying what the children's current needs and skills are, and planning with families about how we can make the children, young people, as independent as they possibly can going into adulthood, and have that plan for what's next after school, after college. You know, does the young person want to remain living at home? Do they want to explore living away from home and what that would look like? And also about making sure we work with other teams and agencies to make sure that the child's needs are met holistically. And it might be that you've never worked with children with disabilities team because you haven't needed a social worker or a family caseworker, but you might feel that you need that support and guidance into adulthood, and that's where the transitions team would be the most appropriate team. So we are constantly looking at ways that we can develop our service and improve our offer to disabled children. So we're looking, currently our focus is on, we've had a review of our transitions service, and there's a number of outcomes that have come through that. The Parent Carer Forum were involved in the review, and we also sought views from children and young people about what they wanted to achieve. And what our young people told us was that, number one, they wanted a job and they wanted to get paid for it. And number two, they wanted somewhere nice to live that's their own. So our focus right now is on working as a multi-agency partnership about how we can promote the independence of disabled children. And you might not need to come through our team to do that. We're looking at working with schools about how we can develop their independence offer. We're looking at our health colleagues about ways that they can support children to develop their independence. We're currently also working on developing our offer for autism. I think it's fair to say there's not always a clear pathway for children and adults with autism. So we're looking on as an authority about how we can develop that, make it more clear and make sure we're meeting everybody's needs. We're looking at developing our local resources, and we're working constantly with commissioners, and PCF are part of our plan, aren't you, Jules, to develop our after school and holiday offer. That's something that we're constantly working on. We know that we don't have enough holiday provision, for example, and we're developing that offer every year. Yeah, we're looking at how we can encourage the market, really. So that means like the providers that are out there, so the different agencies, the different charities, how we can help them to develop their offer so that there's more out there for your children. And we're also looking at how we can share information better. So we've got our Live Well Cheshire West local offer, where all information is held on everything that's available, everything you need to know, but we know that it's not always the easiest platform to access. So we're looking at how we can develop that further as well, so that you can be more autonomous and independent in finding information about what's out there. Yeah. And then there's any questions? And oh, just one thing I forgot to mention is that although we have a criteria for the Children with Disabilities team, we offer in-reach to other teams as well. So just because your child isn't eligible, for example, for our team, they may be eligible for another team, and we can provide that specialist insight and support to that team if needed. Okay, questions? How do you want to do this, Jules?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that I think I probably need to pick up on. One is, I think it might be, just to bring it to life a little bit, I'll talk to you about my experience of direct payments and what I've done with Josh. So for those of you who don't know me, which maybe many of you on the call, I'm mum to Josh, and Josh is 16. He's in year 11 at Oakland School, and he has Down syndrome and something called achondroplasia 2, which is the most common form of dwarfism. And up until about 12 months ago, maybe a little bit longer now, we hadn't accessed direct payments. I'd heard about it in the ether. I knew that there was there's something that was out there, but it was never something that I felt that I needed to access. Then my eldest son, Cameron, went to university, and I realised how much we actually used him as a carer without actually realising it. And this may well be a familiar situation for all of you. So, if I wanted to go and have my hair cut, for argument's sake, I'd say to Cam, just look out for your brother whilst I go and have my hair cut. If I needed to nip to go and get something from the supermarket, he would just hang out with him. Or if you wanted to go on a night out, all the things that you should be doing to have a healthy life yourself. And when Cam left the home, I then realized that there was a massive gap, and I'd taken him obviously hugely for granted, and there was a massive gap. And Josh not only missed his brother, obviously, but also missed hanging out with somebody of his own age. So Cam would take him to Cheshire Oaks, he'd go bowling, he'd go to cinema, he'd do all those things that siblings do, but also it was more than that. So at that point, I then rang IART. Still don't quite know why it's called IART, by the way, Sarah, but anyway, called IART. Got a bit put off because it felt like I needed to report a safeguarding issue or whatever else there is. That is the line that you ring when you're worried about a child as well. And I didn't feel that was our situation, but then got past that, rang them. They're incredibly helpful. They then took an assessment, talked about Josh, talked about whether or not he had an EHCP, talked about what school he was at. And then I got allocated a family worker who then came round to meet him and understand what his needs were, understand what his challenges are, because Josh is, as I said, is 16. He very much relies on Makaton as his form of communication. And although I understand, and his dad understands, and his brother understands, what he's saying, it's tricky. So again, Tina, who was my family support worker, came along, met him, and they decided that they were going to allocate Josh 6 hours a week to kind of have somebody to hang out with. So I thought, brilliant, fantastic, great. Then, I'm going to tell it as it is, a whole barrage of admin, kind of tsunami of admin came my way, which I really wasn't expecting and anticipating. And that was I had to set up a bank account to make sure that the money that the direct payments could go into, so that there was a tracking, so we could make sure that that could be audited. That was suggested as something that I needed to do. Disability Positive helped me with all this, by the way, but again, I felt overwhelmed. Then there was, I needed to become an employer. And so to become an employer, I needed a contract of employment for the people that I was potentially going to hang out with Josh. I then needed to get employers' liability insurance, which was, again, something that I hadn't ever had to experience before. And then I had to find some people, and I didn't know how to go about finding people to actually look out, you know, hang out with him. And it was a really personal thing. So I ended up putting a post on Facebook, feeling like I was selling him, felt a bit uncomfortable, but actually managed to find a couple of young people who were 21 and 18. I went for 2 people because I thought that it would balance, you know, one of them's a lad, one of them's a girl. I was worried he might fall in love with a girl if he had a girl all the time. So we've got basically a replacement brother for Josh. And I get paid monthly. And that goes into this bank account. And then I pay those guys. I keep a track of the hours that they work. I document what it is that they do. So if they take him to football, or they take him to bowling, or they're just hanging out on a night with them playing PlayStation and FIFA, I keep a track of that. And then I'm assuming, this is one of my questions, I'm assuming at some point somebody is going to then check that I'm spending the money appropriately and in the right manner. Is that right?
It is. So the finance team should complete a financial audit on an annual basis, and we'll also complete our own review as well to make sure that everything's still working out for you. And I think your example is really helpful, Jules, and it really has brought it to light in a way that I possibly couldn't do. And for me, that's why we work so hard to try and explore everything, not just think direct payment, because actually it brings its own challenges. I think that's fair to say. You do have to become an employer. There is an admin side to it as well, and most of us have never been an employer before. I haven't. So we are working on, that's why we look at disability positive, community connections, endorphins. We'll look at everything as a way of meeting that need, and we're currently developing other offers as well, so we know that there aren't as many groups of those children maybe with complex physical needs, complex learning disability and autism, so we're looking at how we can commission more activities, so that might be a better way of meeting need than having a personal assistant, for example. So that was really helpful for me, Jules. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate
No problem.
it.
And you know what I struggled with as well, what am I going to get them to do? You know what,
Yeah.
you know, what can they do that's meaningful for Josh, and how can I spend the money? And I think that's that, you know, what is the flexibility of terms of how we can actually spend that money? So can you just go through some of those details with what the do's and don'ts? So you can't pay for X, Y, and Z, but you can pay for X, Y, and Z. Can you just go through some of those for us? That would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be quite generic, because what we look at doing is looking at it on an individual basis and having that clearly set out with parents. And we have to, because there is an audit and we don't do that audit, we have to make sure it's clearly recorded on your child's record what we've agreed. So for some absolute no-nos, please don't go out and buy McDonald's with your direct payment. That's not appropriate use of public funds. You can use it to pay for support. It might be that we've had a conversation with you and said, actually, do you know what would really meet this need? It might be attending a club. And you know, it might be a holiday club, for example, where you would pay for the childcare element, but we would pay for that additional cost because we know it costs more for a disabled child, unfortunately, to access holiday clubs. I'm trying to think of examples. It might be that there's a specific piece of equipment that would meet that need. So we might agree that we can purchase that equipment with the direct payment. I think the most important thing is it needs to be a conversation with us. We're always here and we need to work together, which is the best way to meet that need, and make sure we've got a clear audit trail as well. So because I can't imagine how stressful it would be as a parent for somebody from finance to come along and say, you need to pay us back this money because you shouldn't have spent it on that, because we, you know, that's what would happen if we didn't have that clear recorded agreement.
So for us, for argument's sake, ours is being used for a personal assistant, but we've agreed that actually, although it's 6 hours a week, it might not be 6 hours, it might not be rigidly 6 hours a week, because some weeks he might want to go and hang out with his auntie, or we might be away for the weekend, or you know, we might actually go and see the brother that we've tried to replace, you know, all of those kind of things. So we've got in our agreement that we can spend some of that money, more of that money, or store it up, for want of a better phrase, for the summer holidays, because actually 6 hours is just one day during the summer holidays that I might need some respite, and Josh is probably sick to death of me. So that's what we've kind of like got written into our kind of agreement. So that's how you can personalize it, and I think it's important for parents to know that that's an option then.
It is. We have to determine a number of hours a week because that's how our payment works, but it's for you then to decide how you use it. Like, you could save it all up for the holidays if you wanted to. That's absolutely fine, as long as, you know, we're clear on that, because we need to make sure the support is being delivered at the best time, don't we, really? It might be that he wants to go and do something else on a Saturday and not have time with his personal assistant.
Yeah, absolutely, all of that. And the other thing I would say is, if a child is allocated direct payments, then it rules you out from other offers that are out there. So the community connections offering that you were talking about, you either get one or the other. You either get direct payments or you get community connections. So I think it's important to make sure that families realise that it isn't just direct payments, as you quite rightly said. There is more to it than that. But you need to look at it carefully about what you feel the best need is for your child. And up until Joshua was 15, I used the community connections because that worked better for me. And then I realised this hole in this gap that he had in his life that we needed to fill in a different way.
And I think as well, just an important thing to highlight is, if we're going down the direct payment route, you don't get rid of us. We have to stay involved and we have to have that oversight. Whereas if you're going through the community connections route, you don't need us. You know, we can help you get it all set up, and then we can walk away if you don't need us anymore.
Okay.
I think once it's all set up and with the PA, and we would remain involved for maybe 6 weeks to see how they're settling and if things are working well, and we know that there's going to be those positive outcomes, then the family caseworker, like our lovely Tina, Julie, would close with you. However, you'd still sit, like Sarah said rightly, within our short break review tray, and then every 12 months there'd be that review. So it'd be another assessment and another meeting to kind of bring everything together to make sure that things were still going well, and that those outcomes that yourself and Joshua are hoping to achieve are still on track. And it's a dynamic plan, so we know that people change, and as they get older things change and people's needs change, wants and wishes, so it can then be flexible. And then once that's happened, we then go back to panel to showcase everything that's been going on and the positive things, or if there's something that needs to change. Sometimes it might be that, similar to yourself, Julie, that it changes and that they think actually direct payments just are not working for me and my family. We think maybe something like endorphins and community connections would be better. And in fact we had one of those yesterday. So they'll go back to panel. The direct payments will end, but then we won't just leave it there. We'll support then with the likes of Disability Positive to then set up those community connection payments, and then they can then go off to join the group then, and that's done with a prepayment card, isn't it, Sarah? Where they can pay for those activities. It's much easier.
Brilliant. Okay, right, now to get on to the questions. So we had some questions asked prior to the event, and now we've
look
got
at those first.
We can go through those. So and this is a theme that's come through, not just these ones here, but also previously for our questions that have been raised to us outside of this session, which is that my child isn't deemed disabled enough to be accepted for any kind of assessment, not necessarily any kind of funding. So what would you advise families? Is there an appeals process? Is there something that they can reapply at a different time? Can they move along that continuum of need? What, you know, how does that work?
Yeah. So I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, I don't really like that term, disabled enough, because all children with a disability come under Section 17 of the Children Act and are therefore entitled to an assessment. doesn't stipulate a particular team that has to do that assessment. It does say that that the local authority has to do an assessment. So actually, you should have been signposted to a team for an assessment. So I think it'd be a case of just unfortunately having to re-refer through IR and stipulating that you can have an assessment, and if there are any issues, please, I'm happy for people to contact me, and I can discuss that with IR.
There's a couple of reasons as well, because with the early help assessments, with the TAF assessments, and that's the ones that we really like to go down, because not only is it preventative, but it's still very much holistic. And as you well know, Julie, it's very holistic, and as everybody sort of inputting into that, it doesn't. I mean, it could be if you've got a really great relationship with a staff member at your child or young person's school, who schools can do TAF assessments and can lead on team around the family as well. They can complete assessments in themselves. They can signpost and support with disability positive, endorphins. They can access all of those services as well. The same way, if you come through to the front door into the integrated access and referral team, if a child had autism but maybe not necessarily a learning disability, they could go through to, and on the continuum of need there was no safeguarding concerns, they could go through to the early help and prevention team. We work extremely closely on a daily basis with early help and prevention, offering that specialist sort of knowledge and support and signposting to the family intervention workers within that team. And we can actually attend joint visits with our duty workers, and often we'll attend maybe TAF meetings with our duty workers just to support the family intervention workers further. So it really is quite a robust plan as well.
Okay.
And I think where some confusion can, we revisit this with the front door quite often with IART, is if somebody asks for a referral to children with disabilities team and they don't meet our criteria, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have an assessment. You can go through to a different team to do that assessment. I think it's just about being clear that it's not just the children with disabilities team that does assessments.
Okay, so for parents, the takeaway message is, if your child has got a disability, they're entitled to an assessment. Where that assessment come from might not necessarily be your team, but somebody within the council would need to do that assessment. Yeah.
They also within the core offer at the children's centre, if they've got a younger child that's kind of at nursery or pre-nursery, or even if they have a younger child that doesn't have a disability, because don't forget, team around the family is holistic. We even look at supporting the children that don't have the disabilities, with young carers and other activities. That there might be a health visitor attached, or it might be the opportunity to have a health visitor. Health visitors lead on TAFs as well. There's a team around the family coordinator called Chris Harden, who has oversight and supports and supervises those health visitors, and they too can do those holistic TAFs. We work really closely with health, don't we, Sarah? So again, we can offer that support and guidance as we do within the schools and early help and prevention as well. So that's another avenue where you could get that assessment completed through health.
Okay, thank you. Then we've got some kind of like practical questions. Is it means tested?
No.
Direct payments we're talking about now, sorry.
No, it's not means tested, and we don't in Cheshire West and Chester charge for any of ask for any contributions for children, and that I'm being very specific to children there, because it becomes different when your young person becomes an adult.
Yeah, let's not go into that.
Let's not do that today.
That one in this call, okay? How long do payments last?
As long as they're needed. It's based on that review and assessment, because we've had some parents come to us say, actually, I don't need this anymore. We're managing fine, or actually we need it more.
Okay, but tends to be assessed annually, is that correct?
At least annually. If you need it sooner, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, and if you needed it sooner, you go back through to IR and ask again through the IR number. Okay. And if somebody was put forward, feels that they need direct payments and they refused it, what would be their recourse to that?
That's very individual, isn't it? We'd look at working with that family to help them understand, or and if we've got it wrong, we can work through that, or if we need to explain better why the decisions we've made that actually direct payments isn't the most appropriate at this time. That would be the first. We'd look to resolve it formally together in the first instance.
So would there be a kind of an appeals process, or would that be something less formal than that?
Yeah, you'd contact your worker who's done that assessment and say, I don't agree with this decision. It could be you don't agree with the decision. It could be you don't agree with information that's contained within the assessment, and we'd have to work through that together.
Okay, all right, brilliant. Okay. Again, this comes back to the criteria. When I've tried to contact the disabilities team, I've been told that my child has to have a diagnosis of severe learning disabilities. The school have tried to get in touch for help. I've been offered no help until I get a diagnosis.
That's quite a long question. Hang on, can we break it down? So,
of course we can. So basically, the family's been told that that they're not eligible unless they have a diagnosis of a severe learning disability. School have tried to intervene and help, but that hasn't happened. So they're basically saying that they can't get any additional help until a diagnosis of severe learning disabilities has been established.
we perhaps need to have a conversation. It might be easier, so I can go through and look through our criteria together. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So
Put me in.
Yeah, the lady, whoever's contacted me with regards to that, if you want to email me, and I'll put my email in the chat in a minute, and if you're happy to share more details, I can forward that on to Sarah after this session.
Okay, it might be more helpful, I think, to just understand individually what the needs are, and we can just work that
no
through.
problem. If a young person has autism and not necessarily severe learning difficulties, can they still access the services?
In terms of direct payments or the team, sorry?
I think the team.
The team. It depends on the severity of the autism in terms of how that impacts on your child's daily life. I think that's how we tend to make decisions over eligibility, but it doesn't mean that if they, don't meet our criteria, they may be supported by another team.
Okay, there just seems, I'm just going through the chat now, and there seems to be a lot of commonality about actually having a diagnosis of learning disability and severe learning disability and global development delay. And I think it's confusing for families, and families are being told that they're not eligible because they haven't got a certain diagnosis. Do you need to have a diagnosis to be able to A, have an assessment, and B, to get support?
For the children with disabilities team, as we shared on the criteria earlier, we need to understand that your child has needs that are severe and complex enough to need to come through our specialist service. We are a very small team, and we can only work with those that most need us, but that doesn't mean that you can't get support from any of our other teams in children's social care and early help.
So would there be a baseline? If a child has an EHCP or attends a specialist provision because they've got an EHCP, that would automatically assume that they have a disability. So if your child has an EHCP, would that mean that you can go through that process?
Into of our team, so EHCPs, this is very individual basis, but we've got some children that have EHCPs because of maybe because of trauma they've experienced earlier in their life, means that they have difficulty engaging with education or attaining academically. They may have certain behaviours that challenge. They wouldn't necessarily need, fall under our disability service. So I think because EHCPs are so broad and can be for a number of different needs, that wouldn't be I guess a criterion, if that makes sense.
Okay.
What happens is when it comes through the integrated access and referral team, when it's being screened and looked at, they will often make contact with either myself or Cheryl or Sarah and look at the individual needs. So what the NHS diagnosis is for that child or young person, what is currently going on for that person and how it's impacting on them on a daily basis, and what the risk is. And then depending on what the answers are to those questions for that particular individual would depend where they'd be signposted to access that support. Sometimes it might be with ourselves completing that assessment in terms of a similar experience to yourself, Julie, or it might be, like I've said, whether it would be a health-led assessment or a school-led assessment, or within early help and prevention or social care to complete that assessment.
Okay, thank you. Anne-Marie, you got your hand up. Do you want to go and take yourself off mute and take your video off and ask the question? We don't have to take video off if you don't want to. Fire away when you're ready, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie. No, I'm thinking possibly that. Oh, yes, I can hear you. Go. Anne-Marie. We're struggling to hear you. I will leave your hand up, and I'll come back to you in a minute. I'm guessing that your signal might be a little bit weak, so I haven't forgotten about you. I'll ask a couple more questions and then come back to you. Okay. We've had a question about little penguins. People are struggling to find little penguins. If one of you could helpfully, whilst we're on the call, put something in the link, that would be really helpful, or let us know how we can actually find the little penguin service. That would be great. We've googled and lived well and can't find it. So if one of you can help us with that, that would be perfect.
I'll take that back to Emma as well, about the information, and make sure it can go onto the Live Well website. Okay.
Pinewood, is this for children who are in danger at being at harm? Oh God, I can't read. Is Pinewood just for children who are in danger of being at harm at home?
No. I'm trying to think of a way to, without sharing information, give a bit of an example about what the child's needs might be. So it could be that the child just does not sleep at all and requires intervention from their parents throughout the night. So actually once a month it would really help that parent to get a good night's sleep so they can come and stay with us. They might have very demanding personal care needs, needing moving and handling, and that has a great strain on the parents. So actually providing a short break away from the home just helps keep that child, helps that parent continue caring for their child long term.
Okay. Can direct payments pay for something like Pettipool Plus?
That would depend on your individual assessment, but potentially, if that's what we agree through your assessment, is the best way of meeting that need.
Okay, thank you. Anne-Marie, I can see you.
Oh, I can see you.
Give it a go.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Yay!
Oh, great. Okay, so there can be children with education, health and care plans, EHC plans, who don't have a disability. So it would be, I think it would be too much of a blanket to say, if my child's got an EHC plan, will I be able to access that team? But the reverse also applies. There are children with disabilities who don't have EHC plans. So I don't think, in terms of a blanket statement, yes or no to an EHC plan, or even yes or no to a special school, because every parent has the right to mainstream education for their child. So there may be a child with disabilities who doesn't have an EHC plan and is in a mainstream school, but may still fit the criteria for being a child with a disability.
Okay, thank you. And for those of you who don't know Anne-Marie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I work for Cheshire West Information Advice and Support Service. So our service supports parents of children who have or may have a special educational need or disability. So our criteria for our service are just that you as a parent thinks that there may be a problem. You can get in touch with us and talk through anything to do with what you think is your child's special educational need or disability, and we can support you and signpost you.
And you're independent from us, aren't you, as well, Anne-Marie?
So we our service works at, we work at what's called arm's length from the rest of the local authority. So if you contact us as a parent or carer, we don't share information with any other professional unless you ask us to, or unless there's a risk to the child. But we're a confidential and impartial service.
Thank you. Right. I am just putting my email address into chat. So for those of you who have asked like specific questions with regards to your own personal circumstances, and I've noticed there is a couple of them in there, then please do email me and I will make sure that I forward them through to Sarah and you can pick up directly with Sarah. Okay, so Community Connections offer has changed and can only be used for activities to give the carer a break. What happens if you don't have somebody in your life that can take your child off? How do you use those funds?
I've
Anyone
just
pick
opened the
that?
chat and I'm reading.
It would depend really. So if it's a
I think that one's better for disability positive to answer in a way, because they provide that service. So I don't know, did you say that they're at the next coffee morning?
Yes, disability positive are at Space on Friday. So please feel free to go along and chat to them. If not, again, we can put you in contact, email me, and we can put you in contact with disability positive. And you're right, Sarah, they have been really good at being flexible in terms of how you can actually use those funds. It depends on what kind of activity your child would like to access, or what you think is right for them. So please do, they are the experts in this area. So I would signpost you to those guys.
Yeah, and they're incredibly creative and very enthusiastic. I quite enjoy working with them, but if they can't meet need, they will always come back to us.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to ask one of my team, can you please put the disability positive website details in the chat for me? That would be really helpful. Anne-Marie, have you've talking about the diagnosis, are you happy that that's been answered? Child diagnosis, the NHS diagnosis.
No, it was more specifically about, I think it wasn't listed on the criteria, it just said a diagnosed disability, but the colleague who was speaking said that it was an NHS diagnosis, and I just wanted to raise the issue that some diagnostic pathways can take 2 years now, and there are parents who will obtain a non-NHS diagnosis because of the length of the wait. So is it an absolute definite criteria has to be NHS?
As Laura was saying earlier, that the front door, IART, keep using different names, I'm so sorry. IART will always contact one of us to discuss through individual referrals, and we take an individual approach rather than a blanket, because it's about understanding how that child's presentation and the impact of their needs.
Okay. With regards to, thank you for putting Cheshire Penguin, not Cheshire Penguins.
Oh, it's Norwich Penguins that you've shared, Laura.
Oh,
That's a bit of a trek.
It is a little bit. Okay, with regards to direct payments, how much you actually get paid. So how much per hour can we pay our PAs for using direct payments? Well, if I share my own experience, and then you can tell me.
That'd be helpful.
It depends on whether or not you run your payroll yourself, or whether or not you ask an outside organisation to do that for you. So, disability positive are more than happy to run your payroll for you, but they will take a percentage of, or a monthly amount out of the pot that you've been given by the local authority. So I've chosen to run my payroll by myself. Again, part of the avalanche of admin that's come through. So that means I can pay my PAs more, and I pay them about £11.50, something like that, maybe an hour. But that's you will get a spreadsheet from Disability Positive once you've been allocated your money, which will tell you how much you can actually pay your PA, depending on how much you spent on getting your you've got to get your DBS checks for your the people who are looking after your child. You've got to get your employer liability. So depending on how much you spent on all of that, will leave a certain amount that you can then pay for your PA. If we become an employer, do we have to register with HMRC? Yes, you do have to register with HMRC. Part of the avalanche of admin. Again, Disability Positive can help you with that. Could direct payments fund Zoo membership for the PA to take them, or as a parent, do we cover the cost for this? So this is a real practical question, actually. So can the direct payments pay for a Zoo membership, for argument's sake, and also cover the cost of a PA taking that person to the zoo?
These are very individual questions, so I'll try and think of the best way to answer it. So generally, we would ask parents to pay for activities themselves, because you as a parent, you would do that anyway, if your child had a disability or not. But if it was going to meet a specific need that could only be met in that way, then we could consider it.
So again, if I use Josh as an example, I've just actually got it here. I need to renew it. So I've got a membership for Josh at the Chester Zoo, and one of his PAs will take him relatively frequently to the zoo, because that's something that takes a lot of time, and B, he enjoys. So that's how we use that. So we only use it for the actual payment of the PA to take him to and from the zoo. Okay. Okay.
Can you use
question.
direct payments for overnight care? Ooh. That's always an interesting dilemma for us, because there's certain stipulations around childcare that we have to take into account. So it often depends on the age of the child, and how that's regulated. So again, that would be an individual conversation.
I think that's all of the questions that we've got.
I'm just having a look. Yeah, I think so. It's a very complex field, and it's probably something that we'll have to talk about again. I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Jules? Because after we go away and think about things, we can have more questions.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things, a couple of takeaways from this that I've got, even though I've been through the processes. It's very personalised.
Yes.
So my needs or Josh's needs are going to be very, very different to another boy's needs, even at the same age with similar disabilities. Mm-hmm. It depends on what your family circumstances are like. It depends on what your location is like. So somebody here, I'm in Hertford, relatively rural, our needs might be very different to somebody in the centre of Chester. So the conversation needs to take place about you and your child and your family's needs, and then direct payments, or not just direct payments, but the whole of the services will then be as much as possible tailored to what your needs will be. And that's truly like a person-centered approach. What I would encourage parents to do is to come along to the coffee events and share what's worked for you guys, because again, I chatted to families, and somebody said to me, I'd get a separate bank account, otherwise you're going to have to pull out all of the money that the council give you out your own bank account. And that was a really top tip. They told me which kind of insurance companies I should go to, despite Disability Positive giving us that information, which ones are quick, which ones, so that families have been through this. So please, I would encourage people to go to sort of like the coffee events and find out from other families what it is that they, what lessons learned that they've had. And I know we've mentioned them a lot here today, but please do, I think many of you have heard of Disability Positive and have accessed their services in one respect or another. But please do go and seek them out. They are in the chat. Thank you, Vanessa, for putting their details in the chat. And they will be able to help you with A, direct payments, B, community connections, and C, just generally support you in this kind of journey that you will be on. Okay, right, next slide. Is there a next slide? I think there might be one for me. Oh. I think it's just basically how you get in contact with us. Oh, I'm sending everybody eyes crazy. Oh, there we go. So this is just how you get in contact with us and on what our next in-person session will be. So it's on March the 22nd at Vale Royal Abbey. We will be sending out these slides to everybody who's attended today, along with a link to the recording so you can watch it back. I know that we knew that we were going to get some people that are coming in and out of this session today. So for those of you who missed the beginning of it, it has all been recorded and you can go and watch back. If you want to book on the in-person one, there is a link embedded in here, but just go and take a look at our website. It's got all of the links on there. My email address again is on there if you need to get hold of me. If there's something specific that you would like for me to raise with Sarah, then I'm happily be the liaison with that. Can you remind me, is your email address on?
No.
Okay.
Let me put it in the chat.
If you put it in the chat as well, and if there's something specific, because there were a couple of quite individualized questions that were in the chat. Haven't ignored them. I just think it's probably best that you guys hook up directly so that you can take any questions or queries offline. Okay. Just one last thing in the chat. There you go. That's your email address.
It's me.
All that's left to say is thank you, Laura and Sarah. I really appreciate it. I know that it was you turned it around really quickly for us, so I really appreciate that. and we look forward to seeing as many as you in person as possible in March. That would be great. We will have representatives from education, health, social care. We'll have physios, OTs. We'll have Emma Walker, who'll be there from the Live Well website. We'll have some of the third sector. So it's really going to be a kind of like a mini conference so that you guys can know where to go and what services are out there, as well as the opportunity of having a lunch and catching up with other parents in a similar situation. So thank you very much indeed to Laura and Sarah. We appreciate your time.